In the previous video, we've completed our forgot password control, and in this video we need to create this reset password, which is where user is redirected after clicking the link that's been sent through to the mailbox using this forgot password form. Okay, so let's go back to the editor. We're going to create a new controller. This one is going to be called a reset controller. And again, it needs to be within this namespace app controllers. It extends controller. And the first thing we're going to do is to set the rules for the validation. Protected rules, which is an array. It's going to have password, which is required, so required. And pipe, it needs to be confirmed, meaning it needs to have this other field called password confirmation. And this password confirmation is just required. Let's add dog block. And then what we're going to do is override the parent constructor. So protected function constructor, we add to the constructor. Again, we need to make sure that whoever's accessing this reset root is not already logged in. So we're going to call a redirect if logged in. And let's add dog blocks to this as well. It returns void and add to parent constructor. And after this one, we're going to have our index methods. Let's just shift it up a little bit. So public function index, and from within this method, we're going to start with a user equals this get user. And then we are going to return this view, and it's going to be pages reset, and we're going to add user there. So with user as user, there we go. So that's our index method. Obviously we don't have this get user method, so let's just add this method stop. What I'm going to do here is just add the dog block returns view, which is this illuminate view, and display reset password form. And it also will throw exception, and this is going to be handled. This exception will potentially be returned from within this get user method. Now here, what I'm going to do is start with a token equals this request get token. And this token again is taken from the query string. If we go back to the browser, you may remember we have this token within the query string. So if we go back to the editor, once we've obtained this token, we're going to check if empty token or is null, and then a user variable, we associating instance of a user. So user models by token, we pass this token through as an argument, and then we want to obtain get the first record by this token, so first. And if it's null or token empty, then what we're going to do is this add error for password field, and basically the error message should be associated with a token index. And if we open this reset, pages reset, so resources, views, pages reset file, you'll see we have this token here, which will say invalid token basically. And this form will submit send the request basically to the reset controller to the post method with the given token, and we'll have a look at this in just a second. Now obviously we have this user here sent through to this view, so what we can do from within this view is to simply replace this token within a square bracket with our blade mustache tags and use this user, and then obviously token associated with this given user. So that will append this given token associated with this token entity within the query string. Okay, so we add this error for the password, and then we also throw the exception to terminate the script. So exception, and then we're going to say invalid request. And after this, we simply return user. Now, if we add some dog blocks here as well, so it throws exception, returns a user instance, and summary should say get user instance. Now, one thing, if we scroll up and open our activate controller, and I'm just going to split views here so you can see things a little bit better, you'll see that we have this activate method which uses very similar code. We first obtain the token from the request, then we check if token is empty and if the user by this token is also null, and then we throw the exception from within the activate method on the activate controller, but on the get user we throw the exception, but before this we add error. So what we could probably do is extract a chunk of this code, this specific 2 lines here. First one when we actually obtaining the token from the request, and then when we checking for this token and whether the user is null. So perhaps we could extract it to a parent constructor and then use the methods within this activate and get user. Let's open our, I'm going to close this split screen here. Let's open our controller, and what I'm going to do right at the bottom, I'm going to add a new protected function called get user by token. So protected function get user by token. And what I'm going to start here, and I'm just going to go back to reset controller. I'm going to copy what I have here, paste it within this method. Now, rather than throwing the exception and adding error, what I'm going to do is simply return null for this condition. So return null. So if the token is empty or user cannot be found by this token, then we're going to return null. Otherwise, we're going to return this user instance, which we have obviously associated with this variable when we checking this condition here. Let's import this user as well to the controller. We scroll up, obviously this use statement is now added here. I'm going to move it together with all these our application specific imports. So now we can use this get user by token, but before this, let's just add some dog blocks here. I'm going to start return user or null, and then get user by token. Okay, let's now save this file and close it. And what I'm going to do now is remove this first line here, and I'm going to also check this is null, and this time rather than having this calling this user by token, I'm going to use this get user by token. It looks a little bit cleaner to me. And the same thing will now go for this activate controller. So if we open this one, remove this line with a token, remove this empty, and then for is null, we're going to associate it with the same method. So there we go. It's a little bit better. Chunk of a code is extracted, obviously, just because of this specific add error. We didn't throw actually the exception from this method. I think it's going to work a little bit better this way. So you can obviously modify this however you want from any method. Okay, so we can close this activate controller, reset controller. Our get user method is now also done. So the next thing we need to do is to basically open our browser and check if we can actually see this view. So refresh the page, and there we go. Reset password form is now obviously available to us. If we inspect it, you'll see that obviously if we check the form, there we go, the token has been appended from this user instance. So we can close this. If we obviously hit update without anything, it prompts us to provide a new password. So let's put the new password. Let's say password 2. Hit update. Obviously nothing happens yet because we don't have this post method. So let's quickly go back to the editor. And after the get user methods, if I just scroll up a little bit, let's create a public function post. And from within this function, we're going to start with post request only. We only want to accept post request methods. Then try and catch statement with the exception E. And from within the catch, let's straight away return new JSON response. And this response will return errors, and then response, it's going to be HTTP unprocessable entity. Then we call method send headers and get content. So that's our catch block. From within the try, we're going to start with user, this get user. And now if we go back to this get user method, because I didn't quite explain actually what this add error is here for. Now you can see that obviously from within the index, we don't really work with the form yet, so there's no errors to add to. But because we're using the same method from within the post, that's why we've added this add error. So then later on, these messages, obviously this validation indexes can be sent back to the view and display the relevant validation message. Now, it doesn't hurt us to have it here on the index. That's why we have it straight away within this method, rather than having a separate method then for the post, obviously, action. Okay, so once we've got an instance of the user, now we need to collect request items, and the request items we want are password and password confirmation. Then we need to validate it, so this validate request. Now, once it's validated, we need to unset this password confirmation because we don't want this. So this input offset unset, and let's just copy this password confirmation. And after this, we are ready to update our password, but rather than putting the whole logic here, I'm just going to delegate it to another method, this update password, and I'm going to pass the instance of the user through as an argument. And then we are going to return new JSON response again, and we are going to pass array with a message saying something like your password has been updated successfully, and obviously updated is with this way, and then br you can now log in. Let's just actually extract it to a variable. I'm going to create a variable here, message equals, and then all this we can concatenate it rather than having such a long line. So message, then concatenate it like this. Login, and login, let's make this a link, so href with the / because that's where our login screen is, and closing a tag. Okay, now we can pass this variable through, so message, and then we just send headers as well and get content. So now our update password method, let's add this method. Before we actually do this, let's add doc blocks to the post method, because this one is already finished, so completed basically. So process request, and if we scroll down to our update password, we get in the instance of the user. So let's type hint it here, and what I'm going to do from within is check if !user update password. We're passing through this input get, and we want to get password that's been sent through. If it didn't update it, then we are going to again this add errors, and we're going to add it above password field. Index is going to be failed, and if we go back to this reset, the failed has the message password could not be updated, and then we just throw new exception saying invalid, password could not be updated as well. It doesn't really matter what we put in this exception, because these exceptions aren't really going to be visible on the front end anyways. It's just to terminate basically the execution, but it always makes obviously sense to put something meaningful here. Okay, so for the doc block, update user password. So that's done. Obviously what we're doing here, we're checking if this update password failed. If it failed, then we add the error and we terminate the script. So at this point, our password should be updated, and we should get this message with the login link. So let's test it within the browser. If I hit update now, there we go, that's been processed and my password has been updated. Let's click on this login link and try and log in with this new credential. So password 2, hit return, and there we go, we are logged in.